extreme right. He is the former Nairobi town clerk, and he's also a political analyst. Thank you very much, Philip, for joining us here on the show. We also have Dan Manzo, who is the Makueni Member of Parliament elect. Congratulations, you're back. Yes. You told me in the break that you had a resounding win.
Yes,
yes. So congratulations on that. He's also a lawyer and a member of YPAM. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming to studio this morning. So I just want us to start the conversation straight from yesterday, the statements that were made in Mombasa by the NASA leadership. And of course, Raila Odinga coming out very strong to talk about the petition. And it's good that you're here, Dan Manzo, because I'd like to hear, about this democracy drive that, he was talking about, because we have the Supreme Court looking into this petition in just a few days. So why should we have another alternate move by NASA?
Well, I don't think there is an alternative move as such, because NASA leadership sat down and consulted, and at the time, immediately after the announcement of results, there was a little bit of violence here and there in the country, and there were several deaths, including deaths of children, really, who are baby of 6 months old, a 9-year-old girl, people who've got nothing to do with the election. So we resolved as NASA that we are going to court. And remember, at the first place, it was AFRICOC and other institutions of democracy and civil society who are very much interested. And from the evidence you are collecting, because I'm one of the lawyers helping with this, we realized we can make good case in court. And therefore, we made a petition, which we filed on time. We filed enough affidavits. So we already taken a first move to go to the court. And I believe Kenyans right now have a lot of confidence in the court, the Supreme Court. They are serious judges, very mature judges. They live here in Kenya. And therefore, they know the importance of peace. But for you to have peace, you must have justice. And that's why in our own anthem we say, justice be our shield and defender. So it's very important to have justice and to feel satisfied, because you can see the country is almost divided into two halves. And therefore, you need, whoever wins eventually needs to put the country together, needs to unite the country. And that's why we have gone to court in the first instance. But there is an expectation that justice will be found in the court case.
All right. Philip, one of the statements that were made is that each of the judges should be able to read out, their verdict of this particular case, very different from what happened in 2013, where the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, just read out, what the ruling really was. What do you read from this, demand or request by NASA?
Thank you, Betty. First of all, let me congratulate my good friend, Honorable Manzo, for winning. I think it's the second time.
Yes.
And also, from a very personal level, send condolences to the families who could have lost their loved ones during this violence that occurred immediately after the results were announced. And secondly, I want to thank Kenyans for ignoring the calls from NASA, trying to incite Kenyans into violence. I think Kenyans are mature.
Did they do that?
Yes, they did. The utterances that followed immediately after the actions, the utterances that followed immediately after the results were announced were not very encouraging. But I'm happy that Kenyans ignored and Kenyans are moving forward.
Maybe you could just substantiate, which utterances.
There are utterances, that we cannot accept the results, and yet the will of the people, the Kenyans had spoken. Kenyans had said that the president we want is Uhuru Kenyatta, and therefore, ignoring the will of the people, I think, was not. It was uncalled for. But let me turn to your question. One, I think, and Manzo is one of the young, upcoming, respected lawyers and members of Parliament. I would really be hesitant in directing the courts on how to proceed on this matter, and therefore, I would urge our colleagues on the other side, on NASA, to desist from directing the courts on how they should handle this case. As Manzo had admitted, that the judges we have are mature, are professional, are very well experienced. They should be allowed to perform their duties, and I'm sure they'll do a beautiful job diligently. So let us not interfere. let us not start getting so worried so early. I'm sure the outcome will be the same.
But is it wrong for NASA to come out and say that each of the judges, I mean, should be confident enough to tell Kenyans, this is what I thought about this petition?
You see, I mean, again, I think we should leave that to the courts. How they run the court, you know, how they administer justice, it is clearly spelled out in law. And if it requires that each one of them should read their personal judgment, I don't think that should be a problem. I think at the end of the day, there are seven, there'll be maybe 5, there'll be maybe 6, there'll probably be 7. The judges will write their own judgments, and let us as Kenyans leave it there.
All right.
And be confident that the court will rule and justice will prevail. All
right. Maybe Honorable Manzo, you can just tell us maybe what the essence and the thinking is behind having each judge read out, you know, their verdict.
You know, it's just a general practice in the local courts, what we call the municipal courts and the international courts. I'm sure you saw in the Hague case that there were 3 judges who were handling the Kenyan case. And you can see 2 judges read the judgment and agreed and formed a majority, acquitted the Kenyan, you know, president-elect and his deputy. But 1 judge dissented. And in that case, each judge read their judgment. In Kenya last time, you know, there was a summary. You know, judges can conference. They can conference and come up with one answer. Or they can decide, let's see who are the majority thinking in a certain way. So it's usually free, but there are those 2 methods whereby you can read each one of you a judgment, and those judgments will tie somewhere. We'll find there is you know, the petition is allowed or will disallow the petition, but give reasons, you know, what you call ratio decidental in legal terms. So we will, it's not really out of order for the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi or for Honorable Raila Odinga to make that request, because you see, courts are there to serve Kenyans. And if they are serving us and we are the petitioners, as a petitioner, you have an expectation. And I believe that expectation will still be pleaded by the lawyers who will be leading, you know, in this matter. So I'm sure the lawyers will also make that request. It's really not, it's not against the law. It's just expressing one's freedom as it is enshrined in the Constitution. And I don't think any of the judges will get offended by that because they know their job very well. You have seen the Chief Justice is very steadfast.
Yes.
When we were vetting him, I remember him very well say that in his whole career, he has never taken a bribe, and even swore by the Bible. And said, even in this case, Kenyans are expecting a lot from him. You know, part of it includes working on the weekends. He said he's a staunch Seventh-day Adventist and will not work on Saturday. So there is a lot of things there you expect. But I believe, you know, he has an efficient and sufficient deputy. Whatever is not available, he will be attended to. But also, I'll also urge him to participate, because this time round, the donkey of Kenyans is at some trench. And it needs to be rescued, even if it is on the Sabbath day. Talking
about the rescuing of this donkey that you're talking about in the trench, is Nasser confident in the judiciary? Because we've had statements, you know, since the declaration of results. You know, at one point, Raila Odinga said that this is a time that the Supreme Court should redeem itself. And even yesterday, just, you know, bringing out the you know, some issues to do with the judiciary, that, you know, they need to come out fairly. Does that mean that Nasser really has a bit of suspicion when it comes to the judiciary as it is right now?
Not exactly. You know, the composition of the Supreme Court and judiciary generally currently is being constituted through very serious vetting process. And you remember, these are Kenyans. We don't have foreigners sitting here to determine our matters. They also live here in Kenya. They also know the importance of peace. They also know the importance of justice. What really a judge does is to apply the law, to look at the facts and look at the evidence, and then make a ruling. You know, there's a guideline from the Elections Act that ordinarily you cannot have 100% mistake-free election. It says, but you have to weigh from what has been committed and what has been done, Does it overturn what IBC found?
Okay.
Are there many activities which result? And without going to the merits of the case, you'll realize that the lawyers and the petitioners are confident this time they've got a watertight case, and therefore they have expectations.
All right. Philip, your comment on this confidence that Kenyans and even NASA and even Jubilee has in regards to the Supreme Court, that indeed whatever decision comes out of the Supreme Court, it's going to be trusted?
I think Kenya has come a long way from the dark ages that we saw some years that have passed by. We now have a lot of confidence in not only the judiciary, but in all our institutions. I think our institutions are growing, their performance is getting better, the transparency levels are much better than we saw in the years that have passed. And therefore, all of us should encourage and build confidence in the institutions that we have, and particularly in this case, the judiciary. And I'm glad that Mheshimiwa Maanzo is preaching peace, and I would encourage him also to spread the same gospel to the NASA leadership. Because when Honorable Raila talks about the Supreme Court redeeming itself from what? There was a judgment, there will be more judgments in the years to come. What we need is just to have confidence. And it doesn't mean that if you've lost a case, the judiciary has been unfair, that the law has not been followed. It means that you had no facts, that your case was weak. And therefore, once judgment has been made, not in your favor, I think the good thing and horrible thing to do is to move on and accept that the will of the people must prevail. Yeah.
Interesting. Moving on to looking especially back at the 2013 election, Honorable Manzo, do you think that right now NASA has a stronger case than how it was back in 2013 when CORD was?
Yes, in 2013 the case was lost on technicalities. The law requires this matter to be done within a specific period, and in the case of the presidential election, you can't keep the country waiting for long. So last time, there's an affidavit which was, we managed to get all the facts a little bit late, and therefore it wasn't filed, and the petition had to stand without this very particular affidavit, which was 1,000 pages long. It was not perused because it came in slightly late to court. And for that matter, the case was lost on technicalities. This time around, there are many things which could not be explained then. You see, like, for example, the tally of OMCS, the tally of OMPs elect, and the tally of the governors and the tally of senators should somehow be equal to the presidential tally. And if there is a big misnomer, many votes in a million, half a million, then obviously something is wrong, because every voter was given 6 papers. We are not aware of any reported case of a paper being discarded and something like that. Every Kenyan voted. So even in this case, we expect all those, ballot papers to be equal or almost equal, and the variance to be extremely small. So where you can't explain why you have all these extra papers and that sort of thing, then there is for the court to decide. And it should be, reasonable, such that it's a matter of public notoriety that there was an election in this country, and the judges know what is obvious. So I believe, and we are confident this time around, the courts will find for us, and most probably the election will be repeated, or they will annul the results, or announce the proper results.
Philip Kisia, coming to you, what do you think NASA should be able to prove this time round in this petition?
Well, first of all, I must say that the international benchmark for a successful election is 70%. And from the observers that we had, they have given it above 70%. So I would say that the IBC conducted the elections very well.
But there are questions about the observers that...
Much better than they did.
But Kisia, there are questions about the observers that, they gave a report about the voting process, which obviously was very peaceful and everything went on. Kenyans came out in large numbers, but not really an analysis of what happened after.
Well, those are the initial reports that were given, but I'm sure subsequently there have been other reports that have been filed, and they have given the IBC a thumbs up. But that's not the issue. The issue is that the Kenyans voted, and you can see they voted quite well, and they voted for the person they thought that should provide leadership to this country for the next 5 years. And the difference of 1.4 million votes is really huge from a total of about 15 million voters. NASA needs to prove, first of all, that the election was stolen. And if it was stolen, how was it stolen? What exactly happened? Because people, as Mheshimiwa says, people cast their votes. The agents were there. The agents signed all the mandatory forms that were there. We never appointed the agents for them. These are NASA agents who signed the forms. The forms are now available for them to review and confirm whether really the agents were ghost agents. But we do believe that the agents who signed are NASA agents. And therefore, we'll wait to see whether really NASA will again this time round be able to prove that with a difference of 1.4 million votes, that Kenyans that Kenyans didn't know what they were doing to give President Uhuru Kenyatta a lead of 1.4 million votes. I think they have a very, very huge task to prove that these elections were stolen. And from what I hear, in fact, Mheshimiwa says that this time round they were more prepared. I think this time more round, in my view, they were less prepared. They filed late.
Why would you say that?
They filed late. They filed late. We even are told that some of the documents were being filed after hour. But those are administrative issues that the courts will deal with. But I doubt whether they have any concrete evidence to prove that the elections were stolen. In my view, I think Honorable Raila would want an honorable exit. You know, when you are defeated and you are defeated the way he was defeated, you can't just leave the stage. You would want to leave the stage in style. And the style is go to the High Court, let the courts make a determination. Of course, he knows the outcome that it may not be in his favor, but at least he would have kept the country waiting. But my advice to him is that he needs to move on. I mean, he's tried his best, and will recognize the efforts that he has put in his country in bringing the country to where it is today.
All right, Dan, I'd like you to react to that because he's asking, serious questions about the evidence that NASA this time around has.
First, I want to say that I was personally at the Supreme Court while we were doing the filing, and in fact, I moved a little bit ahead of the rest of the legal team just to ensure that everything is okay in court. I've got about 17 years of legal practice, and in fact, most of my practice in many years has been through election petitions. I did quite a number, and I'm very familiar with the process. I want to say at the material time when we filed the petition, which was before the midnight on Friday, all documents were presented at that particular time. All the documents which we were going to rely on, and they were stamped in my presence. So if there are any other issues, I've heard of some letters be written here and there, I'm sure they will be clarified at the initial stage when the court now will first come and review. You know, there's usually a conference between the lawyers and the judges to make sure everything is okay. Any issue raised, I believe that will be on Friday. And then at that particular point, then you can be sure if there are any issues will be raised. But I can assure you the stamp. There were very many Kenyans watching this. Even KTN covered it live. It was stamped in presence of the registrar. And I believe all our papers, which are going to be relied on, were including electronic evidence, which we have, and which has been preserved very well. I was personally there because, if you lose one document at the registry, and there are many people. In fact, some strangers were removed from the registry because everybody flooded. If you lose documents there, then you have a reason to worry. So I want to assure Kenyans that we have done our level best. There are a lot of other things we have not pleaded because they don't meet the bar of the law. There was a practice in the NASA regions whereby identity cards were bought, but that did not turn the event. We have a lot of people, despite IBC giving the number 70,000 for people to text and rectify and check and confirm, and even under the law, the voters' register be pinned in each polling station 7 days before the election. And a lot of people found they'd been moved. The IBC gave a reason that we needed a maximum of 700 people. But some of the people were taken 30 kilometers away, 50 kilometers away. Very many people did not vote. But we still did not plead that because it was not raising the bar to what is required. And I believe the case we have presented is a very good case. We really want to wait for the Supreme Court to give its verdict.
We will take a break. We're coming back. We're coming back in a short while. Just a few minutes. We're coming back to continue the conversation. But we don't have to just take a break for a few commercials. Let's do that. The conversation continues in a few minutes.